The autumn wind howled through Silver Creek like a banshee, rattling the weathered shutters of the Last Dollar Saloon as Sarah McCann wiped down glasses behind the bar. At 28, she had the kind of quiet strength that came from surviving more hardship than most people faced in a lifetime. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her green eyes held a wariness that had been earned through 2 years of running a saloon alone in a rough Montana mining town. It was nearly midnight, and the last of her customers, a group of boisterous miners celebrating a small gold strike, had finally stumbled out into the storm. Sarah was grateful for the business, but she was also grateful for the silence. The constant noise and crude behavior of her patrons wore on her more than she cared to admit. She was counting the evening's meager earnings when a thunderous crack echoed through the night, followed by the sound of splintering wood and a horse's terrified whinny. Sarah grabbed the shotgun she kept behind the bar and cautiously approached the front door. "Hello," she called out. "Anyone out there?" A weak voice answered from somewhere near the boardwalk. "Help, please." Sarah opened the door, immediately soaked by the driving rain. In the dim light spilling from her saloon, she could make out a figure lying motionless beside an overturned carriage. A magnificent black stallion stood nearby, reins tangled, clearly spooked but uninjured. The man was unconscious, blood seeping from a gash on his forehead, and his left arm bent at an unnatural angle. His clothes, even soaked and muddied, were clearly expensive. Fine wool coat, leather boots that probably cost more than Sarah made in a month, and a gold watch chain visible beneath his vest. "Mister, can you hear me?" She knelt beside him, checking for signs of life. His breathing was shallow but steady, and his pulse was strong. Whatever had happened when his carriage overturned, he was lucky to be alive. Sarah had two choices: leave him in the storm to fend for himself, or bring him inside and risk the complications that came with helping a stranger. In a town like Silver Creek, showing kindness could be seen as weakness, and weakness could be fatal for a woman trying to survive on her own. But Sarah McCann hadn't survived 2 years as a widow by being heartless. Her late husband, Tom, had always said that a person's character was measured by what they did when no one was watching. This man needed help, and she was the only one around to give it. "Come on, then," she muttered, slipping her arms under his shoulders. "Let's get you inside before we both drown." It took all her strength to drag him through the door and up the narrow stairs to the small room above the saloon where she lived. She managed to get him onto her bed, then immediately set about examining his injuries by lamplight. The head wound looked worse than it was. Scalp injuries always bled heavily. His left arm was definitely broken, but it was a clean break that would heal properly if set correctly. More concerning were the bruises on his ribs and the fact that he hadn't regained consciousness. Sarah had learned basic medical care from the town's previous doctor before he'd been killed in a bar fight 6 months ago. Since then, she'd been the closest thing Silver Creek had to medical help, treating everything from knife wounds to bullet holes in her back room. She cleaned and bandaged the head wound, then carefully set and splinted his broken arm, using strips torn from one of her own petticoats. As she worked, she found herself studying his face. Even unconscious and battered, he was handsome in a refined way that was completely out of place in Silver Creek. His hands were soft, with no calluses from manual labor, and his skin had the pale tone of someone who spent most of his time indoors. "Who are you, mister?" she whispered as she covered him with her best quilt. "And what brings a fancy gentleman like you to a place like this?" The storm continued to rage outside, but Sarah felt oddly comforted by the presence of another person in her lonely room. She settled into the wooden chair beside the bed, her shotgun within easy reach, and began her vigil. Around dawn, the stranger's eyes fluttered open. They were a striking blue-gray, like storm clouds, and held an intelligence that immediately put Sarah on alert. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice cultured and educated, with just a hint of an Eastern accent. "The Last Dollar Saloon in Silver Creek, Montana," Sarah replied carefully. "Your carriage overturned in the storm last night. You've been unconscious for hours." He tried to sit up, then winced and fell back against the pillow. "My arm. Broken, but I said it properly. You also have a concussion, so you need to take it easy for a few days." The man studied her face with those penetrating eyes. "You're a doctor?" "I'm whatever this town needs me to be," Sarah replied. Right now, I'm the person who kept you from bleeding to death in the rain." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Then I owe you my life. I'm Daniel Wright." He paused slightly before giving his surname, as if he wasn't quite comfortable with it. "Sarah McCann, this is my place." "You run a saloon?" There was no judgment in his voice, just curiosity. "Someone has to. My husband built this place, and when he died, I kept it running." She stood, suddenly aware of how close she'd been sitting to a strange man's bedside. "You hungry? I can fix some breakfast." "That's very kind, but I don't want to impose." "Mr. Wright, you're not going anywhere for at least a week. That concussion needs watching, and if you try to move around too much with that broken arm, you'll do more damage. So you might as well resign yourself to being imposed upon." As Sarah headed downstairs to prepare breakfast, Daniel watched her go with growing interest. Sarah McCann was nothing like the women he was accustomed to in Boston or San Francisco. Society ladies who fluttered and simpered and saw him only as a means to social advancement. This woman had saved his life without asking for anything in return, and she carried herself with a dignity that had nothing to do with wealth or social position. What Daniel didn't reveal was that he had come to Silver Creek for a very specific purpose: to personally assess the mining operations in town that his company had been acquiring piece by piece over the past 5 years. Thornton Mining Company now owned virtually everything in Silver Creek, including the land beneath Sarah's saloon. He had planned to evict all remaining independent business owners and turn the entire town into a company operation. But lying in Sarah McCann's bed, being cared for by a woman who had no idea she was nursing the man who held her future in his hands, Daniel found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about business, power, and what really mattered in life. For 3 days, Sarah tended Daniel with the careful attention of someone who understood that life was precious and fragile. She brought him meals, changed his bandages, and sat by his bedside during the long hours when her saloon was closed, talking about everything and nothing. Daniel was unlike any man Sarah had ever known. He listened when she spoke, asked thoughtful questions about her life, and treated her with a respect that had nothing to do with what she could do for him. When she mentioned her struggles to keep the saloon running, he offered practical advice about managing finances and dealing with difficult customers, insights that suggested he had significant business experience. "You seem to know a lot about running a business for A." Sarah paused, realizing she still didn't know what Daniel did for a living. "For what?" he asked, amusement in his voice. "Well, you're clearly educated, and your clothes are expensive. I figured you for maybe a banker or a lawyer from back east." Daniel felt a familiar twist of discomfort that came with deception. "I've had some experience with business matters. What about you? How did you end up running a saloon in a place like Silver Creek?" Sarah settled back in her chair, her expression growing distant. "Tom, my husband, he was a dreamer. Heard about the gold strikes up here, and convinced me we could make our fortune. We sold everything we had back in Kansas, and came west." "But the gold didn't pan out?" "Oh, there's gold here. All right. But the big mining companies moved in fast, bought up all the good claims. By the time we arrived, there was nothing left for the little prospectors, except what the companies didn't want." Her voice carried old pain. "Tom built the saloon because he figured miners needed a place to drink and play cards. For a while it worked. What happened to him?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "He got into a dispute with some men over a card game. They said he was cheating. But Tom was as honest as the day is long. When he tried to defend himself..." She shrugged, but Daniel could see the grief still raw in her eyes. "They shot him down right there in the main room." "I'm sorry," Daniel said quietly. "That must have been devastating." "It was, but crying wouldn't pay the bills or keep the roof over my head. So I learned to run the place myself. It can't be easy, a woman alone in a town like this." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "Most of the men around here see me as either a target or a curiosity. They figure a widow running a saloon must be desperate enough to provide more than just drinks and card games." Daniel felt a flash of protective anger. "Do they bother you?" "They try. But I keep Tom's shotgun behind the bar, and I've proven I know how to use it. Word gets around." Over the following days, as Daniel's strength returned, He found himself reluctant to leave the sanctuary of Sarah's room. Downstairs in the saloon, he could hear the rough voices of miners and cowboys, but up here there was peace. Sarah would bring her mending or her account books and work quietly while he rested, and their conversations ranged from books they'd read to dreams they'd harbored to observations about human nature. "You're well educated," Sarah observed one evening as they discussed a volume of Shakespeare she found among his belongings. "College?" "Harvard," Daniel admitted, then immediately regretted the revelation. Harvard was expensive, exclusive, not the kind of education a simple businessman from back east would typically have. But Sarah didn't seem to notice the implication. "That explains your fancy vocabulary. What did you study?" "Business, economics, some law." "All true, as far as it went. My father insisted on a practical education." "Is he in business too?" Daniel hesitated. His father had been Thornton Mining's founder, and Daniel had inherited both the company and the ruthless business philosophy that had built it. He died when I was young. "So you understand what it's like to lose someone important?" "Yes, I do." That night, as Sarah dozed in her chair beside his bed, Daniel watched her sleep and felt something he hadn't experienced in years: contentment. Not the satisfaction of a successful business deal or the temporary pleasure of expensive luxuries, but genuine peace. Sarah McCann had given him something no amount of money could buy: the feeling of being valued for himself rather than his wealth or power. She cared for him because he was injured and needed help, not because he was Daniel Thornton III, heir to a mining fortune. But as his health improved, Daniel knew his deception couldn't continue much longer. Soon, he would have to return to his real life, his real responsibilities. His business associates would be expecting reports on Silver Creek's acquisition. Decisions would need to be made about the future of the town and everyone in it, including Sarah. On his 6th day of recovery, Daniel was finally strong enough to sit in a chair by the window. From there, he could see the main street of Silver Creek, the general store, the blacksmith shop, the small church, and the ramshackle collection of buildings that housed the remaining independent businesses. What he also saw, with the eyes of a businessman, was a town in decline. The big mining operations had moved most of their workers to company-built settlements closer to the mines. Silver Creek was becoming a ghost town, surviving only on the stubbornness of people like Sarah who refused to admit defeat. From a purely economic standpoint, purchasing the remaining properties and consolidating the entire area under Thornton Mining control made perfect sense. It would be more efficient, more profitable, and would provide better living conditions for the workers. But it would also destroy the lives of people like Sarah McCann, who had already lost so much and was fighting so hard to maintain what little independence she had left. "You're looking thoughtful," Sarah said, entering with a tray of food. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Much better, thanks to you." Daniel accepted the plate of stew and fresh bread, marveling again at Sarah's ability to create something nurturing and delicious from simple ingredients. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "If someone offered to buy your saloon, offered a fair price, enough to start over somewhere else, would you consider it?" Sarah's expression immediately became wary. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. You've mentioned how hard it is to make ends meet here. Wouldn't it be easier to go somewhere with more opportunities?" "This is my home," Sarah said firmly. "Tom and I built something here. Just because it's hard doesn't mean I'm going to run away. But if the town continues to decline, then I'll be the last person to turn off the lights." Her green eyes flashed with determination. "Some things are worth fighting for, Daniel, even when the odds are against you." Daniel nodded, but inside his heart was breaking, because he knew something Sarah didn't. The decision about Silver Creek's future wasn't hers to make. It was his. And soon, very soon, he would have to choose between his business obligations and the woman who had shown him what it meant to be truly cared for. On Daniel's 8th day of recovery, the sound of approaching horses shattered the peaceful routine Sarah had grown to cherish. She looked out the window to see a group of well-dressed men dismounting in front of her saloon, their expensive clothes and polished boots marking them as outsiders to Silver Creek's rough-and-tumble world. "You expecting visitors?" Sarah asked Daniel, but something in his expression sent alarm bells ringing in her mind. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." His words were cut off by heavy footsteps on the stairs and a sharp knock at the door. "Mr. Thornton?" "Sir, we've been searching for you for over a week." The voice was cultured professional and carried an authority that made Sarah's blood run cold. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, then looked at Sarah with an expression that held both regret and resignation. "Come in, Harrison." The door opened to reveal a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, followed by two others who were clearly guards or bodyguards. The man's eyes immediately found Daniel. "Sir, when your carriage was found overturned and you were missing, we feared the worst. Are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine, Harrison. Mrs. McCann has been taking excellent care of me." Harrison's gaze shifted to Sarah, and she saw the calculation in his eyes. The assessment of a servant, someone of no consequence. "Mrs. McCann, we're grateful for your assistance. You'll be compensated, of course." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather wallet. "Will $50 cover your expenses?" Sarah felt as if she'd been slapped. "Mr. Thornton?" she said quietly, looking at Daniel. "That's your real name?" "Sarah." Daniel started to rise from his chair, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Mr. Daniel Thornton," Harrison continued, oblivious of the tension in the room, "of the Thornton Mining Company. Surely you've heard of the company, Mrs. McCann? They own most of the mining operations in this territory." The color drained from Sarah's face as the implications hit her like a physical blow. Thornton Mining Company, the same company that had been systematically buying up Silver Creek, piece by piece. The same company that had been pressuring her to sell her saloon for months through increasingly aggressive intermediaries. "You're him," she whispered. "You're the man who's been trying to run me out of business." "Sarah, please let me explain." "Explain what?" Her voice was rising, fury and betrayal warring in her chest. "How you've been lying to me for over a week. How you let me nurse you back to health, while you were planning to destroy my life." Harrison looked confused. "Sir, I don't understand. The acquisition of Silver Creek properties is proceeding according to plan. Mrs. McCann's establishment was scheduled for purchase negotiations this month. Acquisition?" Sarah turned on Daniel, her green eyes blazing. "Is that what you call it? You've been systematically destroying this town, forcing people to sell their homes and businesses, and you call it acquisition?" Daniel stood despite his injuries, his face pale. "Sarah, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think." She backed toward the door, her hand instinctively moving toward where she would normally find her shotgun. "You came here to survey your conquest, didn't you? To see firsthand how your company's pressure tactics were working." "That's enough," Harrison interrupted. "Mr. Thornton, we really must go. The board meeting about the Silver Creek consolidation is scheduled for tomorrow in Helena, and your presence is required." Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. Tomorrow. They were making final decisions about Silver Creek tomorrow, and she had been caring for the man who would seal her fate. "Get out," she said quietly. "Sarah, get out." The words erupted from her with all the pain and rage of years of struggle, of loss, of fighting against forces beyond her control. "All of you, get out of my home." Daniel stepped toward her, his eyes pleading. "Sarah, please, let me explain what really happened. Let me tell you why I'm really here. I know why you're here. You're here to finish what your company started, to take the last bit of independence this town has left." "That's not true. When I came here, yes, that was a plan. But meeting you, getting to know you, has changed everything. I don't want to destroy Silver Creek. I want to help it." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Help it? By buying up everything and turning it into another company town? By forcing out everyone who's made a life here? By investing in it? By bringing in legitimate businesses, good jobs, a future for the people who live here, under your control, under your ownership?" Daniel couldn't deny it, because it was true. Even with the best of intentions, his vision for Silver Creek's future would mean the end of its independence. Harrison cleared his throat impatiently. "Sir, we really must leave. The weather is turning, and we need to reach Helena by tomorrow evening." Sarah opened the door wide, her entire body rigid with suppressed emotion. "You heard him, Mr. Thornton. You have important business to attend to. Don't let me keep you from destroying any more lives." Daniel moved toward the door, then stopped. Sarah, I want you to know that everything between us was real. My feelings for you, the way you made me feel, none of that was part of any plan. Your feelings. Sarah's voice was ice cold. You want to talk about feelings? Let me tell you how I feel. I feel like a fool for believing that a man like you could care about a woman like me. I feel used and betrayed and stupid for thinking that maybe, just maybe, I had found someone who valued me for who I am rather than what I could do for them. Each word hit Daniel like a physical blow. That's not, but most of all, Sarah continued, her voice breaking despite her efforts to stay strong. I feel grateful that I found out who you really are before I made an even bigger fool of myself. Daniel stood in the doorway for a long moment, memorizing her face, knowing it might be the last time he ever saw her. Sarah, Goodbye, Mr. Thornton. She closed the door firmly, then leaned against it as the sound of boots on the stairs grew fainter. Through the window, she watched as Daniel was helped into an elegant carriage that probably cost more than she made in 5 years. As the carriage disappeared down the muddy main street of Silver Creek, Sarah allowed herself to feel the full weight of her heartbreak. For 8 days, she had dared to believe that she might not have to face the future alone. She had allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to have a partner who respected her strength and shared her dreams. Instead, she had been caring for the enemy. The man who held her future in his hands had let her feed him, tend his wounds, and share her deepest thoughts and feelings while hiding the fact that he was the architect of her destruction. But Sarah McCann had survived worse betrayals. She had buried her husband, fought off aggressive customers, and kept her business alive through sheer determination. She would survive Daniel Thornton's deception, too. And when his company came for her saloon, she would be ready to fight. The Thornton Mining Company boardroom in Helena was filled with cigar smoke and the confident voices of men discussing profit margins and expansion strategies. Daniel sat at the head of the mahogany table, his broken arm still in a sling, listening to his executives present their final recommendations for Silver Creek. The McCann property is the last holdout, reported James Wheeler, the company's acquisition specialist. The woman's been refusing our offers, but we can use eminent domain if necessary. The territorial government has already approved our expansion plans. What's her property worth? Asked board member Harrison Clark. Market value is maybe $300. We've offered her $800, which is more than generous. Daniel thought of Sarah's saloon. The way her face lit up when she talked about the dreams she and Tom had shared, the pride she took in maintaining the business her husband had built, the determination in her voice when she said some things were worth fighting for. What happens to Mrs. McCann if we proceed with the acquisition? Daniel asked quietly. Wheeler shrugged. Not our concern. She'll have the money to relocate somewhere else. Start over. More than fair compensation. Start over with what? At her age, with no other skills, where would she go? The room fell silent. Daniel's executives exchanged glances, clearly confused by their employer's sudden concern for the welfare of a single saloon owner. Sir, Harrison said carefully, this is a business decision. We can't let sentiment interfere with sound economic strategy. Can't we? Daniel stood, walking to the window that overlooked Helena's bustling streets. Wheeler, what's our net worth? Approximately $47 million, sir. And this Silver Creek consolidation, how much will it add to our annual profits? Conservatively, about $200,000 per year. Daniel did the math. Less than 0.5% increase to their annual income, in exchange for destroying the lives and livelihoods of the remaining Silver Creek residents. Gentlemen, I'm calling off the Silver Creek acquisition. The silence that followed was deafening. Sir, Harrison said slowly, I'm not sure I heard you correctly. You heard me. We're not buying out the remaining property owners. Instead, I want to propose a different strategy. Daniel turned to face the room full of stunned executives. We're going to invest in Silver Creek as it is. Provide capital for the existing businesses to expand and modernize. Bring in a doctor, improve the roads, maybe build a proper school. Create a legitimate town that serves our mining operations without destroying its character. Wheeler looked as if Daniel had suggested giving away money to strangers. Sir, that makes no economic sense. We'd be spending money to help our competitors. What competitors? A widow running a saloon? A blacksmith who shoes our horses? A general store that sells supplies to our workers? Daniel's voice carried an authority that reminded everyone in the room exactly who owned the company. These aren't competitors. They're potential partners. This is about that woman, isn't it? Harrison's voice held disapproval. The saloon owner who cared for you. Sir, with all due respect, you can't let personal feelings interfere with business decisions of his magnitude. Daniel met his gaze steadily. Harrison, you've been with this company for 15 years. In that time, have you ever known me to make a poor business decision? No, sir. Then trust me on this one. The future of Thornton Mining isn't in squeezing every last dollar out of places like Silver Creek. It's in building sustainable communities that want to work with us, not against us. The debate continued for another hour, but Daniel's mind was made up. He was a majority shareholder, and the final decision was his to make. The Silver Creek acquisition was dead, but he had a much more important decision to make. Whether he had the courage to return to Silver Creek and face Sarah's justified anger. 3 days later, Sarah was cleaning glasses behind the bar when she heard a familiar voice. Is the kitchen open? I'd like to buy a meal. She looked up to see Daniel standing in the doorway, hat in hand, his broken arm still in a sling. Her heart lurched despite her best efforts to remain unmoved. We're closed, she said coldly, not looking at him. Sarah, please. I just need 5 minutes to tell you what happened in Helena. I don't care what happened in Helena. It doesn't change anything. Daniel stepped into the saloon, looking around at the simple but clean furnishings, the bar that Tom McCann had built with his own hands, the photograph of Sarah and her late husband hanging behind the register. You're right, he said quietly. It doesn't change the fact that I lied to you. It doesn't change the fact that I let you care for me while I was planning to take away everything you worked for. But it might change what happens next. Despite herself, Sarah found her attention caught. What do you mean? I called off the acquisition. Thornton Mining will not be purchasing your saloon or any other Silver Creek properties. Sarah stared at him, looking for signs of deception. Why? Because you were right. Some things are worth fighting for. Some things are more important than profit margins and quarterly reports. Your investors must love that decision. Daniel's smile was rueful. They think I've lost my mind. Maybe I have. But for the first time in my life, I made a decision based on what was right instead of what was profitable. Sarah set down the glass she'd been cleaning, her hands trembling slightly. So what happens now? You go back to Boston, and I stay here, and we pretend none of this ever happened. That's one option. Daniel moved closer to the bar, his eyes never leaving her face. Or there's another option, which is, I stay in Silver Creek. I invest in the town, but as a partner, not an owner. I help build something good here, something that honors what you and Tom started. Sarah's breath caught. And us? What about us? That depends on whether you can forgive me for lying to you, whether you can trust me to be the man you thought I was, instead of the man I've been. Sarah studied his face, seeing the vulnerability there, the genuine regret. Daniel, I don't even know who you really are. For 8 days, I thought I was falling in love with Daniel Wright, a gentleman from back east. But you're Daniel Thornton, one of the richest men in America. Those are two completely different people. Are they? Daniel reached across the bar and gently took her hand. The man who listened to your stories, who admired your strength, who fell in love with your courage and kindness. That's who I really am. The money, the company, the power, those are just things I inherited. They're not who I am inside. How do I know that? How do I know you won't get bored with small-town life and go back to your real world? Because this is my real world now. You are my real world now. Daniel's voice was steady, certain. Sarah, I've spent my entire adult life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. My money, my influence, my connections. You're the first person who ever cared about me just for myself. Do you really think I'd give that up? Sarah felt tears threatening, torn between hope and fear. Even if I could trust you, we're from different worlds. I'm a saloon owner in a frontier town. I'm a man who loves a strong, independent woman who saved his life and showed him what really matters. Daniel's thumb traced over her knuckles. "Sarah, I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for a chance to prove that love is more important than the circumstances that brought us together." For a long moment, the only sound in the saloon was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Sarah looked at their joined hands, remembering the 8 days when she had dared to dream of a different future. "If you stay," she said finally, "you have to really stay. No running back to Boston when things get difficult. No changing your mind when you remember what you're giving up. I'm not giving anything up, Sarah. I'm gaining everything that matters. The people here won't make it easy for you. They don't trust outsiders, especially rich outsiders. Then I'll have to earn their trust, the same way I'm hoping to earn yours back." Sarah looked into his eyes and saw the man who had talked with her through long nights, who had listened to her dreams and shared his own, who had made her feel valued and cherished. Daniel Thornton might be wealthy and powerful, but he was also the man who had thanked her for every small kindness, who had treated her with respect and genuine affection. "One condition," she said. "Anything. No more lies. Ever. Complete honesty between us, no matter how difficult. I promise." Sarah took a deep breath, then made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Then welcome to Silver Creek, Daniel. I hope you're ready for a very different kind of life." When Daniel kissed her across the bar of the Last Dollar Saloon, Sarah tasted possibility and hope and the promise of love that had already survived deception and overcome impossible odds. 6 months later, Silver Creek was thriving. The town had a proper doctor, a new school, and businesses that were prospering thanks to Daniel's investment and Sarah's practical wisdom. The Last Dollar Saloon had become the unofficial town hall, where important decisions were made over Sarah's excellent meals and Daniel's fair mediation. And on a crisp spring morning, Sarah McCann became Sarah Thornton in a simple ceremony in Silver Creek Small Church, surrounded by neighbors who had learned to trust the Eastern millionaire who had chosen love over profit and community over wealth. Sometimes the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought or sold. They could only be given freely with an open heart and the courage to trust in love's transforming power.